Hello, and welcome to my Dyson Sphere program Advanced Belt Building tutorial. As this tutorial is an advanced guide on belts, consequently, I will not be going over things such as how to build different height belts, the general mechanics of the belts, nor even how to create half-height belts. These are all required prerequisite knowledge that you will need for this tutorial. The number one belt trick is the blueprint mode's copy and paste is completely overpowered. For a quick example, let's say I need to get over this line of production, but there's not quite enough room due to this line of production being in the way. The easiest way to do that will be to make a vertical elevator. By building a ramp that gives me all of the pieces that I need to build this elevator. Now, I can use copy and paste, going up half a belt at a time in order to keep my build nice and dense. As you can see, the game does not seem to notice when turns are too tight. This means you can alternate directions very easily, or even create excessively tight turns. It seems like the only thing the copy-paste cares about is whether or not the belts are connected. See, these belts didn't even connect. So as long as you make sure these belts connect, you can make nearly anything you need, including such a tiny elevator. This method, of course, also works in reverse. As you can see, due to the fact that Blueprints created these, it's easily blueprintable. If you find yourself in a situation where you've built something that you can't seem to connect to, that's alright. All you have to do is continue it on until you reach a point where Blueprints aren't connecting to something strange, like that was connecting to a down angle facing the wrong direction. If I connect that one, now it's a flat angle, everything can connect to that. Quick note, out of habit, I always use yellow belts. I find it helps me visualize which direction they're moving, if it's not moving a million miles a minute. Plus, any blueprints made with yellow belts can easily be upgraded, but blueprints with blue belts aren't guaranteed to be easily downgraded. Second note, from this point on in the tutorial, I will be using a blueprint mod that allows me to change the camera angle while in blueprint mode. That is the only part of this mod that I will be using. Everything else can be done in vanilla Dyson Sphere program. Let's say all of the other ports of my logistics tower are being used, but I still need 3 more belts worth of material to come out of it. Unfortunately, I have a line of production that is in the way. Trying to get this middle belt out without causing some sort of collision issue, such as that one, isn't possible with conventional belting methods. Fortunately for you though, copying and pasting does not care how tight your turns are. This means creating a setup like this is a breeze. If you don't misclick like I do. The second belt technique is something that I call belt bending. First, let me tell you a little story. Back a long time ago, before blueprints even came out, they were adjusting hitboxes so that blueprints would work better once they were actually added. So, one of the tricks that I used, where I would start up high, dip down low, cut off the ends, and then connect to make a half-height little bump like this, no longer works. Of course, now I know if you just start from the bottom instead, and then connect them, it still works just fine. But back then, I was looking for an alternative. This alternative I found while messing about with that previous method. I noticed that when you connect a belt that is only halfway above another belt, they don't get any sort of connection error. And so without an error, it attempts to connect them. For some reason, it just bends it a little. So, with a bit of tinkering, I eventually figured out that if I took a half-size belt and stacked another full belt on top, I could pull that second one out of the way so it can't collide, and then pull the original belt up high enough for me to build underneath it. This has all of the pluses of the previous half-height belt, where you can build above it just fine, while still having the appearance of having a clear path for the other belts. Now, of course, that wasn't the only thing I found. I kept experimenting with this, and I have learned that there are a few rules when it comes to these. The rules are, the game will pull on the belt that is clicked second. So if I, say, wanted to pull this one from up top down, I would click the bottom one, and then click on the top one. And now I have a 1/4 belt. The second rule is the belts will end up halfway between the belt that was pulled and the original. So of course, now I have a 0 height, a 1/4 height, and a 3/4 height, and a full height belt. This is particularly useful in specific circumstances, such as this one. Take a very short little bump. Of course, this is only going up half a height. When you stack two of them on top like this, you can be sure to only move up by 1/4 heights. Now, it goes from ground level to 1 full height. You can tell it's directly on that height because when you move forward 1 unit, it doesn't give you any error. If the belt wasn't exactly on a belt height unit, it would give you an error because it's attempting to snap to the next belt unit. Just like this one. If I were to attempt to take this to the extreme and pull up a belt that's only 1 length long as high as I could before blueprints broke, the max would be 1 1/4. So as you can see, this one is 1 1/2 high, because that's the 1 height and it's going up another half. This cannot be blueprinted. When you try to paste the blueprint, it will say it is going too far. If I were to now do this again, but only go up 1 1/4 belt, there's 1 1/4. It can be copied. Now, I have a small theory for why this is possible. Because you could say, well, why doesn't the game just notice that it's only one length long and cancel out any blueprints that disobey the maximum of one height difference? That's because the maximum height difference that you can get at an angle, ever since they added the angled belt, is more than a half height. When you build a belt perfectly diagonal like that, it only uses one unit. But it is very much farther than one belt length, one grid length away. So if you had something like this, you can still connect them. I, of course, haven't used any bending or any weird mechanics to do this. All I've done is used the basic belt mechanics. Yet I have a belt that's only one belt length, going up an entire unit in height. That means I can pretty confidently say, if you have any blueprints with only one belt height difference, such as this, where it goes from 0 to 1, I can confidently say it will not break in the future unless there is some sort of major overhaul in the blueprinting and or belt system that changes how belts work fundamentally. Because if I couldn't blueprint that, that would be a little bit unfair, because I did create it with legitimate mechanics. Combining this belt bending with how overpowered the blueprint method is, we can make nearly anything. I saw this balancer on DysonSphereBlueprints.com by SpikeTrap and thought, wow, these could definitely be a little bit more dense. Also, if on the off chance SpikeTrap is watching this, you did make a small error in building this balancer. Because these two belts are already coming from the same balancer, putting them through another balancer doesn't actually do anything. What you need to do is mix these two belts with the other two belts, like I do on my modified version. Otherwise, the last two balancers aren't actually doing anything. It's not actually throughput unlimited unless they mix again. Anyway, that's not the point. If you take these, and instead of only using conventional illegal belt methods, where you are turning yourself around super quickly, and instead use any of the belt methods that I have shown you, you can have much more compact and less spaghetti-looking designs. For example, let's make this little bit. So as we can see, first it goes up half a unit, and it turns around and goes up a full unit, it looks. Yeah, because it goes from half, highlights, there we go, it goes from half to halfway between 2 and 3, and then it goes up another half to be back in line. That. So we have to go from half to 3/4 to half. Not too bad. So let's extend that out a little bit. Place some helpers on top. Bend him up a half. Place a couple more helpers. Pull him up the rest of the way. Extend him out again. Oop, vainly you go away. extend him out again, and we'll go up by another half size. Perfect. So now we have the first bend in. Maybe that's a better example. Now we have the first bend in. Now, instead of continuing to belt bend, we can notice that this one is on a regular unit height, and this slope is a regular slope, only going up by half steps. That means we can just take this, copy and paste it directly on top of it. Perfect. Now we have copied. Unfortunately, I did lie to you there. If you take a look, when I take that, and I take, this is the one that I copied directly, this is the one that I made. If I place this here, you'll see that it actually just collides. So how did I make a version that doesn't collide? Well, if you look very carefully, let me take this guy and move him a bit closer. You'll see that he is actually misaligned from the grid very slightly. That misalignment is barely enough for these not to collide with the inside of the sorters, or the splitters. But how exactly do you do that? One quirk you might notice is when you are building in freeform belt mode. The belts don't fully leave the grid until your angle is wide enough. Only one of the grids will be ignored. So if I need something that's just barely off grid, I can make a bunch of these and get a set of belts that is all very slightly off grid. In order to use belts like these effectively, you need to treat them as if they are sort of their own grid. Using these dots that I've preset up as a scaffold, I will only ever create more slightly off-grid belts by connecting them. Then you can belt bend and everything else exactly the same way as before, except with just a few extra steps of copying and pasting. So, let's rebuild this snake thing just like I said. So instead of making my own dot, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to take this, and place him 4 units away, and then connect them. But as you can see, when I connect them, they're trying to get back on the grid. So I press R twice to make sure that does not happen. Now I can do that, cut off all of those. Connect those as well, same way. And now stretch these guys up just like a regular belt bending. Perfect. And now, exactly like I just said, instead of, because he is on a full belt height, instead of doing some more bending, I can copy and paste the heights that we need move you out a little bit more. Make sure you're off-grid, just like before, and paste him into place. And now, I actually have a solution to our problem. Boom. He fits right in there. This last technique is very much a niche use, because unless you are doing something with very strange hitboxes, such as these, then this isn't really all that useful. Finally, because I'm sure a few of you are wondering what this build was at the beginning of the video. This is my 12 belt elevator. Well, elevators are kind of niche and not really useful. They sure are pretty. And I kind of went a little overboard when I was designing my elevators. So, these elevators don't even work in a single blueprint, because if you were to attempt to blueprint it all, it would disconnect many parts of it and cause them to combine and then spectacularly fail, such as that. So, I'm going to make a set of 3 blueprints where you can do step 1, which you may recognize as a belt that is halfway off the grid, combined with that same zigzag elevator that I showed at the very start, but off the grid, combined with an elevator that uses these pieces these 0 height to 1 height diagonals, because of how they are directly on the grid, and these are exactly halfway between the grid, they don't interfere with each other. So you can make a quadrivator with just those 2. Where is he? There we go. I will be renaming these before I make a blueprint book out of them. When the belts connect to each other and they bend in on each other, they seem to become much smaller, you know? It is definitely not still in this space. So, you can actually still build around in that 4x4, which means you can totally just add a spiral elevator, a regular one, right along the outside. And holy shit, is it cool looking. Links to a few tutorials where I learned my things in the description. For example, the zigzag elevator, I learned how to abuse copy and paste through this guy. He really deserves a lot more credit for that, because it's really cool. The links to my blueprint account on DysonSphereBlueprints.com, where you will see a good chunk of my favorite blueprints, and just a few things that I'm proud of, like my spiral elevators and stuff like that. Hopefully some of you guys find this useful. And that's about it. Thanks for watching.